So we've got another woman writing and saying things online that are absolutely wild.
We absolutely should be dating our co-workers. Dating our workers could be a viable solution to the sex and relationship recession. You're seeing their good, their bad, benefits. You probably have something in common with them, a lot of the same people. Casual cruelty, ghosting, none of that can happen with somebody you work with.
I've covered topics like this, done videos along these lines in the past, and y'all seem to kind of like it. So I thought I would throw this one in here as well. It was actually pretty fun to make. So what we're going to talk about is a woman who thinks you should be asking women out at work. This here is Juno Kelly. She's a writer on internet culture who published a recent New York Times guest essay titled, "Go On, Date Your Coworkers." She says that office romance could help fix modern dating. And she ends up by asking or telling readers, so why don't you ask your colleagues out? So let's answer her question. Why don't we ask out our colleagues? Let's start this with a little bit of context about the article. It's actually a very short article. Of course, I will link it and all of my sources in the description below. So Juno begins by admitting that workplace dating may not be worth the risk, which every man on the planet already knows. But then she ends by encouraging readers to ask out a colleague anyway. And by that, we all know that she means men. She repeatedly uses surveys and statistics to make a workplace romance look unfairly suppressed, right? So why aren't we doing this? There's no reason we shouldn't be doing this. And she doesn't think that that's right. There are several of her figures that do not support the claims that she builds around them, and that's what we're going to do. Go through, I think, 4 of them, one at a time, and then I'll just briefly mention a couple of others, because I don't want to make this any longer than it really needs to be. But the most important admission is who's expected to initiate and absorb the professional risk. What she's selling is that dating apps reduce people to personal digital profiles, is something along the lines of what she had said. Co-workers, on the other hand, they get to know each other as complete human beings. Daily interaction with co-workers provides accountability and it reveals their character. Secret workplace relationships are exciting, she says. Sleeping at each other's homes and then staggering into their office at different times so as not to arouse suspicion. Flirty kicking under the desk, she mentions. And sneaking into a bar to become more intimate, along with getting personal in the kitchen office. Now, she devotes vivid language to the excitement and then gives the risk as a very short acknowledgement. Gossip, discomfort after the breakup, of course, power imbalances that could be claimed, real or not, and harassment or coercion. So the key point is that this is not a serious risk-benefit analysis that she's giving us. It's a romantic fantasy that's built nothing but around somebody else taking the first dangerous step. That's you. Okay, so let's go over some of what she claims, and I'll correct the record here. Only 16% of workers went on a date last year, down from 40% in 2009. So 16% of coworkers went on a date together. Now, where the 16% came from is SHRM's, SHRMS, their 2025 workplace romance survey. And what SHRM actually asked was whether workers had gone on a date with a colleague during the past year. And the result was 16% compared with 21% in their 2024 survey. SHRM itself described the dating behavior as remaining relatively consistent. Again, I'll put all the sources down below for you. Now, where the roughly 40% that Juno mentions comes from Career Builder's annual office romance surveys. Entirely different source. What Career Builder did was measure whether workers had dated a coworker at any time during their careers. A 2010 Career Builder release reported that 37% had ever dated a coworker, consistent with 40% in 2009 and 2008. So the sources linked inside the Times article is actually a 2018 Career Builder release saying 36% had ever dated a coworker, compared with 40% in 2008, not 2009. So she compares 1 year of behavior with an entire working lifetime and presents them as a single historical trend. 16% last year is not down from 40% over lifetime. Those are two very, very different questions. Let's move on to this second statement from her. She cites 1/4 of workers supposedly fearing harassment allegations. Not because she thinks that the number is trivial, but because she needs to explain why people stopped dating coworkers. Then she puts the concern in parentheses and immediately goes back to selling the fantasy that she's trying to sell. Here, Vault's 2018 Office Romance Survey. And what Vault actually reported is that more than 1/4 of respondents said prominent sexual harassment allegations had made them less likely to consider a workplace relationship to be acceptable. Not that they fear harassment allegations. I realize that small change in words, in language, may seem like a small alteration, right? But it's very, very different. Vault did not report that 1/4 of people personally feared being accused, expected an HR complaint, had stopped approaching coworkers, or believed that a false allegation was likely. They said it reduced their likelihood to consider a workplace relationship. Again, sounds like a small difference, but it's really big. The survey is also from 2018, despite Kelly writing that coworkers now fear allegations. She converts a change in attitudes toward office romance into a personal fear of being accused. Respondents there were not asked, "Are you afraid of being accused?" She just simply rewrote the question into an answer that she needed. Here's the third one. She states that more than 40% of people who dated a colleague married that person. This actually comes from Forbes Advisors report. Again, I'll put this up on the screen for you to have a look and link below. This 2023 Workplace Romance Stats report. Forbes reported that 43% who dated a colleague had married someone that they worked with. The sample included about 2,000 employed Americans, and it did not establish that 43% of workplace relationships led to marriage, which Juno is claiming. It did not confirm or claim that the respondents married the same coworker that they were in a relationship. They did not confirm or indicate that new coworker dates had a 43% chance of leading to marriage. In fact, the report itself also reported 40% of respondents saying that they had cheated on a partner with a coworker. 57% said a workplace relationship affected their work performance, and 52% said coworkers treated them differently when they were in a workplace relationship. But Juno Kelly, she pulls the romantic outcome from a survey that's filled with professional and relational fallout. She gives you the marriage number and leaves the cheating, the gossip, the altered treatments, and the work performance numbers on the editor's desk. The fourth thing I wanted to cover that she had said is that coworkers are safer than strangers and more likely to marry than a Hinge match. Now, obviously, I don't think that there's any proper source for this. Workplace familiarity may provide social accountability, but it's not the same as public safety, emotional safety, protection from HR or legal consequences. And what she's immediately omitting is the dangers for men. She's speaking only about women's perspectives. Now, the source is that same Forbes advisor survey. Forbes claims that people were more than twice as likely to marry someone from work than someone from a dating site or dating app. But it didn't track comparable groups of new coworker dates, new Hinge matches, all of that over the same period of time, or until marriage or until breakup. Yet Juno Kelly makes the claim specifically about Hinge, although the source compares coworkers with dating sites and apps in general. Coworker familiarity does not establish men's safety, and the Hinge comparison is unsupported by any equivalent populations or observable periods. Right? So your coworker may be less of a stranger. Yes, that's true. But she's also connected to your manager, your HR department, your income, and everyone else who decides whether you have a future at your employment. And I could keep going, but let me just briefly go over these last ones. She says workplace crushes collapsed from 49% to 22% in a single year. 90% of people who had sex with a coworker did not regret it. Almost 2/3 of managers believe that workplace romances benefit their teams, and that younger adults meeting fewer partners at work proves that this has been a decades-long decline. Now, I'm not going to dismantle every statistic or piece of information that she gave us in this short article because you already get the pattern. I'll put the overlay up here, in the links below. She grabs the most female rewarding interpretation of weak, mismatched, and outdated evidence, turns it into a workplace romance fantasy, and then expects you to put your paycheck and your reputation behind it. But even after stripping it all down, the biggest problem still remains. Somebody has to make the first move. And it's not going to be Juno. Men are expected to initiate, as we all know. In fact, men do report initiating sexual activity more frequently, and they perceive stronger social expectations to do just that. 37% of men reported romantic interest in a coworker that was not reciprocated. That's 37% of men compared to 19% of women. 43% of women reported receiving an unwanted workplace advance compared with 28% of men. Think about that. More than 4 in 10 women report receiving an unwanted workplace advance. So men obviously are more likely to act on attraction. That's pretty well established as well. Women are more likely to experience workplace attention as unwanted. Now, you can control whether you're respectful or not. But you can't control things like whether she's attracted to you, whether she's going to feel uncomfortable if she tells coworkers, or whether your actions will actually eventually reach management or HR. She experiences the fantasy, then tells you to perform the dangerous part. And here's the point I want to cover that Juno would never tell you or anyone else. Your career does not need a conviction to be damaged. One polite invitation is not sexual harassment, or at least it shouldn't be. But what if a woman, the one that you ask out at work, what if she's repeatedly coercive or she likes to retaliate? An employer does not need a criminal conviction, as I mentioned, to decide that you're a professional risk. The consequences begin long before the courtroom. It starts with HR documentation, management distrust, removal or reassignment of your duties, transfer to another location, even lost opportunities, up to termination. And even a consensual relationship creates additional exposure when it ends. Think about that. Messages are exposed and shared with other people. Coworkers choose sides. Conduct is misinterpreted, and private conflict enters the workplace. They're, again, affecting people's performance. So men are expected to make the approach despite the very obvious professional risks. Because this chick...
We absolutely should be dating our co-workers. Dating our workers could be a viable solution to the sex and relationship recession. You're seeing they're good, they're bad, benefits. You probably have something in common with them, you're a lot of the same people. Casual cruelty, ghosting, none of that can happen with somebody you work with.
Likes office flings. So let's consider these rhetorical questions. What protection does Juno Kelly offer any man that follows her advice honestly and still loses his job or his reputation? Who restores the career or the professional relationships that he loses? Who bails him out of jail and defends him in court when false allegations come? And why would your paycheck become part of somebody else's romantic experience? So my final point is that men are not irrational when they avoid workplace romance. They're responding, in fact, sensibly, to backlash that women like Juno Kelly can dismiss because they're not expected to initiate or to pay the same price when it all goes wrong. Give me your thoughts. I'd love to know if you've had any of these experiences. I'll be back soon. Have a great day.